within and outside the Muslim world. Subjects covered by its studies on Islamic civilization include the works of prominent Islamic scholars and philosophers having left their marks in the history of culture. Subjects covered by its studies on Islamic civilization include the works of prominent Islamic scholars and philosophers having left their marks in the history of culture. IRSICA also conducts research and holds conferences on cultural interactions between the Muslim world and other civilizations and publishes the outcomes of these activities. Cultural and architectural heritage. IRSICA is a subsidiary of the OIC in charge of research on cultural and architectural heritage in the Muslim world and preservation of the assets of this heritage. The mandate of IRSICA also includes the assessment, registering, study, restoration and conservation of Islamic cultural heritage properties around the world. The Centre also organises congresses, exhibitions, training programmes and publications
This is just to alert you that the program will be starting shortly. advised that we are, in fact, awaiting the arrival of His Excellency the President, and we are advised that he will be here shortly. So we hope that you can just bear with us for a few more minutes. Thank you. Your Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, the Honorable Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, other esteemed members of the Cabinet and Government of Guyana, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin, 11th Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Errol Kilish, Director General of the Research Center for Islamic History, Art, and Culture, hereinafter referred to as IRSICA, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, Special Envoy of IRSICA, Mr. Imran Ali, Deputy President of the Muslim Youth Organization, Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, heads and members of the Islamic community, members of other faith-based organizations, members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, students who are in attendance here, members of the press and media, and all of you who are here and in the electronic environment who are distinguished members of today's audience. I am profoundly honored by having the privilege to introduce and guide you through this significant and historic event. It is the occasion of the opening and ceremonial formalities of the International Symposium on the History and Legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. Now, this is a strategic and important conference, a wide-ranging international event. It will cover the fields of culture, history, political affairs, sociology, religion, tradition, and a range of disciplines and interests present in the Caribbean today because of the Islamic presence and influence. The conference promises an analysis of Islam, one of the world's great religions, brought to the Caribbean because of two ignoble institutions, slavery and indentureship, but very influential and which also occasioned a very eventful migration of people. It has had great impact on the West Indian society. It is a thing of beauty, an impetus for nation building, and an epoch of human and social development. The proceedings of the conference, which will follow this opening, promises to be thorough, educative analysis of all the issues surrounding the central subject of the Islamic presence in the Caribbean. Guyana plays host to this conference, and Guyana is in association with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, and the Research Center for Islamic History, Art, and Culture. Now, these are international organizations, and In order to understand the relationship between them, you can think about the United Nations. You can think about the OIC in the context of the United Nations and the IRSICA in the context of an association such as UNESCO. So that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guyana, acting in association with the OIC and with IRSICA, is pleased to present this conference. We are going to begin this morning's program with an expression of faith, which is a quotation from a document which is not only an expression of faith, but an agent of music and poetry. I am referring to the Holy Quran. And we are going to be presented with a recitation from the Quran, translated and performed by Hafiz Salih Rahim. It is my pleasure to invite Hafiz Rahim to the podium to do his performance.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلتكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم. إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون. قل أتعلمون الله بدينكم والله يعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض والله بكل شيء عليم. يمنون عليك أن أسلموا قل لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم للإيمان إن كنتم صادقين. إن الله يعلم غيب السماوات والأرض والله بصير بما تعملون صدق الله العظيم. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and aware. The Bedouins say, "We have believed." Say, "You have not yet believed," but say instead, "We have submitted." For faith has not yet entered your hearts. And if you obey Allah and His Messenger, He will not deprive you from your deeds of anything. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. The believers are only the ones who have believed in Allah and His Messenger, and then doubt not, but strive with their properties and their lives in the cause of Allah. It is those who are the truthful. Say, would you acquaint Allah with your religion, while Allah knows whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth, and Allah is knowing of all things? They consider it a favor to you that they have accepted Islam. Say, do not consider your Islam a favor to me. Rather, Allah has conferred favor upon you that He has guided you to the faith, if you should be truthful. Indeed, Allah knows the unseen aspects of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is seeing of what you do. Verily, Allah has spoken the truth. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hafiz Rahim, for the recitation and translation from the Holy Quran. Now, I think I can say that at Guyana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation places great value on the opportunity that they have to host this conference. And in this morning's proceedings, the task to welcome you to this event falls upon the Honorable Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And it is therefore my honor to invite the Honorable Minister to the podium to give his words of welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, my former colleague. His Excellency, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, Speaker of the National Assembly, Cabinet colleagues, members of the diplomatic community, ambassadors and representatives, His Excellency Dr. Kilich, Director of URSICA, heads of the discipline services, National Security Advisor, permanent secretaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to formally welcome our visiting delegates and team to Georgetown, Guyana. For those of you who are visiting Guyana for the very first time, a very special and warm welcome. And for those of you who are visiting the region for the very first time, we're happy that Guyana is your first stop. And we hope that you will return another time for maybe another engagement similar to this, but more importantly, for engagement that would lead to further studies in Islamic studies, which is very important and valuable not only to Guyana, but to this region and by extension globally. So I'm very pleased and honored to be here today to be part of this symposium. The conference marks an important milestone in our recognition and appreciation of the significant contributions made by Muslims in shaping the Caribbean region. As we gather here to reflect on the past, it is imperative that we acknowledge the diversity and richness of our common heritage. The story of the Caribbean is often told through the lens of the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, and the struggles for independence. Yet, it is equally essential that we acknowledge the presence, resilience, and legacy of Muslim communities that have been an integral part of our tapestry. Muslims in the Caribbean region have a long and vivid history dating back to the time of the transatlantic slave trade. Many people of African descent who were brought to these shores under the harshest circumstances clung to their Islamic faith for solace, strength, and identity. The arrival of Muslim indentured laborers from India and the Middle East further enriched the Caribbean Muslim experience. It is through the stories of Muslim abolitionists, entrepreneurs, educators, and cultural custodians that we truly grasp the influence and impact of these communities. Their contributions to education, agriculture, commerce, and the arts have helped to shape the economic, social, cultural, and institutional fabric of our nations. Furthermore, the unyielding spirit and tenacity of Caribbean Muslims have spurred movements in social justice, civil rights, and the rise of interfaith dialogue. Today, we honor the unwavering efforts of trailblazers who have committed their lives to encouraging great inclusivity and understanding in cultures. This conference serves as a forum to promote Caribbean Muslims' culture and contributions. It also highlights our promotion of inclusivity, equality, and respect for diversity. Finally, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to the symposium's organizers, speakers, and participants. Your presence here today reflects our dedication to expanding knowledge, fostering discourse, and honoring the vibrant history and culture of Caribbean Muslims. May this gathering inspire us all to work together across borders and backgrounds to create a society that recognizes and honors the contributions of all people, of all faith. Let us embrace our common heritage, learn from one another, and work together to create a better future for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your welcoming remarks. I just want to make reference to some of the things said by the minister concerning the study of concerning Islamic studies and various elements of Islamic studies. And it reminds me that a part of this conference, I understand, is going to be taking place on the campus of the University of Guyana. So it is significant to observe the involvement of the university there. We now continue with this morning's proceedings by hearing remarks by Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, who is Special Envoy of the Research Center for Islamic History, Art, and Culture. And it is therefore my pleasure to invite Dr. Abdullah Quick to come to the podium to give his remarks.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Jameel Anbiya'i wa Mursaleen. Wa ala Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon all of the righteous ones who have walked the earth from the beginning of time. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and all of our righteous teachers. Your Excellency, Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Your Excellency, Hugh Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Professor Mahmoud Errol Kilich, Director General of URSICA, to the ministers, the diplomatic corps, to the honorable delegates, to brothers and sisters and friends. I begin with the greeting words of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And these are the words of peace. And I take this moment to show special respect to the indigenous people of Guyana, South America, and the Americas, that they have walked these lands for thousands of years, given their lives, prepared the cultures of this part of the world that we are enjoying so much today. So peace be upon them as well, and it is our prayer that they would grow from strength to strength and be seen as a strong part of our growing community. It is a great privilege and honor to be here today in this historic symposium on the history and legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. And the question I might ask, why are you having a historical symposium in Guyana? You should be having a political one. You should have an economic conference. But history has a lot to do with the living present. What happened in history affects the way we think about ourselves, the way we treat ourselves, and the way we are treated by others. The full potential of people for work in the living present that leads them to a new future cannot be activated till they have an alert, alive relationship with the past. No person can be truly released from the past until he understands the past. True history can help correct the bias of the past and create a new vision for the future. A person who is liberated from slavery and colonization physically, but not mentally, is still a slave. The Caribbean region is at a crossroads. Will we continue to be dependent on others or truly free? I want to congratulate the government of Guyana and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and its Research Institute for making this bold initiative to bring together experts in the field of history and culture. It's been a long road. Almost 2 years this idea has been discussed and developed, and finally it is taking shape. So today we have brought together a number of experts to produce new narratives for this region. We will look at the waves of Muslims who came into the Caribbean and study their impact. We are bringing forward documented evidence that shows that Muslims came to this region before Columbus, from Andalusia in Spain, from West Africa. Written records, eyewitness reports, maps, sculptures, oceanographic evidence, and much more. We will also look at the waves of Muslims who came during the Atlantic slave trade, bringing forward written documents, eyewitness reports, autobiographies that confirms that somewhere between 15 to 30% of the enslaved African people and political prisoners who came into this region were Muslims. We will look at the true history of Jamaica, Haiti, Belize, Suriname, Trinidad, Guyana, and many more, and bring out the resistance to show the slave rebellions, the scholars who walked these lands. We will also look at the 19th century and the indentured labor period in details, the struggle to maintain identity, preservation of religious practices and culture, from Suriname to Guyana to Trinidad to the islands of the Caribbean, not only the Indian experience, but the Javanese experience. We will look at what was the impact of the Muslims in the economy of the region, in sports and recreation, in arts, culture, and storytelling. We will shift also to the wave that came into the region in the 20th century, bringing economic migration, Arabic-speaking people coming into this part of the world, Gujarati Muslims developing their communities here. We will look at the development of Islamic movements, institutions, the role of the masjids, the houses of worship. Most of our scholars are with us today, but some could not attend, and they are sending their findings to be put together in a way that could be accessible to the public. So it is our hope and prayer that these deliberations will be another step in liberating the minds of our people from the colonization of the imagination. May the Creator bless this effort and enable Guyana and the Caribbean to grow from strength to strength and become a beacon of light for the rest of our troubled world. So I leave you in peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Quick, for that intervention as a part of the general introduction to this conference. Now, we are going to take another look at a side of the Islamic legacy that I have already alluded to. I refer to the Quran as musical and poetic. And evidence of this lies in the fact that it has generated a performing art known as Qasida. And we are going to be given a little example of the Qasida this morning by Imran Ali. But I want to refer to language as another part of the Islamic legacy in the Caribbean region. And it is indeed a part of the heritage of the Muslim influence in the Caribbean region and the culture that it has created in the Caribbean region. And in talking about language, the performance is going to be in the Urdu language. So it's going to be an example of Qasida. It is an Islamic chant in the Urdu language by Imran Ali, who is the deputy president of the Muslim Youth Organization. It is my honor to invite Deputy President Ali to come forward and do his performance.
His Excellency, the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali, Ministers of the Government, members of the Diplomatic Corps, scholars, delegates, brothers and sisters all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And to my non-Muslim friends, may the peace, mercy and blessings of God Almighty be upon you. The qasida I'm about to render, the poet beautifully says, O Prophet, you're the light of our eyes. Only you can intercede for us on the day of judgment. O Prophet, on judgment day, all our crimes shall be exposed. O Prophet, you are our master. We depend on your intercession. O Prophet, who do not ask through you, it is their fault. O Prophet, you're Allah's grace to mankind. O you at fault, do not hesitate to ask forgiveness through the intercessor, Muhammad, on whom be peace. Mecca with all its beauty of being the cradle of the revelation of the Quran, yet still Medina excels her beauty by the presence of our intercessor, Muhammad, on whom be peace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے، میں بندہ تمہارا. ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے، میں بندہ تمہارا. سمائے نظر میں کھینچے میرے دل میں یہ صورت تمہاری، یہ نقشہ تمہارا. ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے، میں بندہ تمہارا. قیامت میں چوتیں گے سستے وہ تاجر، خریدا ہے جس نے سودا تمہارا. قیامت میں چوتیں گے سستے وہ تاجر، خریدا ہے جس نے سودا تمہارا. تم آقا ہو کس کے ہمارے ہمیں زائم کس کا تمہارا. ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے، میں بندہ تمہارا. جو تم سے نہ مانگے وہ اس کی خطا ہے، سخاوت کا بہتا ہے دریا تمہارا. جو تم سے نہ مانگے وہ اس کی قطع ہے، سخاوت کا بہتا ہے دریا تمہارا. جو کچھ مانگنا ہے تو مانگو اسی سے، برا دینے والا ہے داتا تمہارا. ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے میں بندہ تمہارا. سیاہ کاریوں سے نہ گھبراؤ یارو، کہ حامی ہے ایک کملی والا تمہارا. سیاہ کاریوں سے نہ گھبراؤ یارو، کہ حامی ہے ایک کملی والا تمہارا. مکہ کو حزینت مکی کے قدم سے ہے، مکہ سے افضل مدینہ تمہارا. ہے محشر میں کافی وسیلہ تمہارا، تم آقا ہو میرے میں بندہ تمہارا. سمائے نظر میں کھنچے میرے دل میں یہ صورت تمہاری، یہ نقشہ تمہارا.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
The Muslim presence in the Caribbean is marked by a number of things, which include architecture, the mosques, and the distinctive green and white, the symbolic moon and star. Things such as dress, clothing, the way people dress, elements of culture, cultural traditions and performance traditions. And this includes what we have just heard, the Qasida. So thanks very much to Imran Ali for that performance to give us an idea of what the Qasida sounds like. As we proceed, as we move forward with these proceedings, it is my honor to invite the Director General of the Research Center for Islamic History, Art and Culture, IRCICA, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Errol Killich, to come forward and present his remarks.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Your Excellency Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Your Excellency Mr. Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and Excellencies, Ministers, Ambassadors, distinguished participants and scholars and students, I am honored to address the opening of the International Symposium on the History of history and the legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. This is a historic moment we have been expecting with enthusiasm. Permit me at the outset to express my heartfelt gratitude to Your Excellency, Mr. President, for accepting to hold this symposium in Guyana, overseeing the preparations personally and honoring the symposium with a featured address. With the excellent cooperation accorded through the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the project has been realized under his auspices and with a remarkable academic peer review. This first event of its kind, co-organized by the OIC and IRSICA in the Caribbean region, realized jointly with your esteemed government and the University of Guyana, is a landmark event with many significant features. The symposium represents a leading multilateral initiative that carries information about the cultural heritage of Muslims in the Caribbean from its local context to global knowledge. Furthermore, it builds a bridge between cultural audiences in the Caribbean and those in the other OIC member states. The cultural heritage of Muslims in the Caribbean, which was transferred from ancestral, artistic, architectural, and literary origins and preserved till today as learned traditions, represent an inherent historical connection between Muslims in Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. It also reflects some of the geographical path in the history of the dissemination of Islam across the world. All of these aspects of Islamic history and culture come within the fields of interest of IRSICA, or center. Highlights of the symposium to be included in IRSICA's reports will draw attention to these aspects and foster awareness of Islamic studies on the Caribbean as a research subject. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I believe that with this rich peer review or multilateral initiative carries high significance at the global cultural diplomacy level. All of the 57 member states of OIC and IRSICA are developing countries with very diverse economic profiles, but similar development concerns, and all are confronting the common challenges facing the global community. Brought together by the common majority faith and shared civilizational heritage of their peoples, these countries are cooperating in all fields of international relations under the OIC umbrella. IRSICA, as the OIC's cultural subsidiary, is entrusted with the mission to strengthen these common cultural grounds to study, preserve, and promote correct understandings about the history, arts, sciences, philosophy, scholarship, cultural and social traditions of Muslim peoples across the world. The Muslim world is a rich mosaic of societies with various experiences of multi-faith and multicultural coexistence, and IRSICA's mission upholds the principles of inclusiveness. Our studies cover the OIC membership area spanning from Albania in the north to Mozambique in the south, from Indonesia in the east to Guyana in the west, Guyana and Suriname in the west, as well as the Muslim communities and minorities living outside the OIC membership area. With this understanding, our program of symposia, titled History of Islamic Civilization and Muslim Cultures, has focused till now on the following regions: Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East and the Mediterranean, Eastern Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, the Balkans and Southeast Europe, Volga-Ural region, Caucasia, and Central Asia. To give a few examples, we organized the third symposium on Southern Africa and the third symposium on Central Asia in 2022, in South Africa and Uzbekistan, respectively. The second symposium on Southeast Asia will take place next month, inshallah, in Malaysia. And our sixth symposium on Volga-Ural region will be held next year in the Tatarstan, Russia. Under a separate program dedicated to the history of intercultural relations, we are preparing our 5th Symposium on China and the Muslim world, Cultural Encounters, to be held next year. We are also collaborating with international organizations, particularly the UN Alliance of Civilizations. IRSICA's 6-year joint program conducted with the History Education Division of the Council of Europe has included a panel on history education as a tool for cultural cooperation, organized during the 3rd Global Forum of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations in Brazil in 2010. These activities are helping to improve the scope and methods of research on global Islamic history and Muslim cultures through a complete thematic and geographic coverage, an inclusive, objective periodization and localization of the topics. Our symposium is also important from this standpoint to situate the Caribbean context within international studies on history and culture. Finally, I have the pleasure to note that in recent months, we were visited by professionals and cultural personalities from Caribbean countries at IRSICA during their trips to Istanbul, Turkey. This shows a growing awareness about IRSICA among cultural circles in the Caribbean, which we value highly. We owe it mostly to the Symposium project and contacts established in this regard. I wish to thank IRSICA's Special Envoy to the Caribbean, Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick, for his invaluable contributions, which enabled our initial contacts with the government and the people of Guyana from his first assignment as IRSICA's Special Envoy, and later continued to support the preparations. Among the valuable contacts, I wish to mention Mr. Sheikh Moin al-Haq, President of the Central Islamic Organization of Guyana, and Mr. Abdul Alim Rahim, President of the Guyana Islamic Trust, for their cooperation. I believe that our stay in Guyana during the symposium will allow us to build further acquaintances with cultural authorities and institutions of the region. I would like to conclude my address by reiterating my deep gratitude to His Excellency, President Mohammed Irfan Ali, for the highest level cooperation granted to the event, the excellent arrangements and hospitality extended to all delegates throughout the symposium period. This has indeed been a most memorable, outstanding feature of the symposium. I wish to express my special gratitude to Honorable Mr. Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs, for the constructive cooperation accorded to the project. Special thanks are due to Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Ambassador Elizabeth Harper, and her colleagues, with whom 9 Zoom meetings were held during the past months. I also would like to convey my deep thanks to the distinguished University of Guyana and for their excellent cooperation, and the Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Education, Mr. Al-Kerigdon, the Master of Ceremonies of the opening session. Sincere thanks are due to participating scholars and researchers for their interest in the event and their contributions. I would like to warmly thanks to Kari for the recitation of verses from Holy Quran and the excellent presenters of the cultural items in this August opening. I thank you all. Thank you.
We are indeed grateful to His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Errol Kilich, Director General of the IRSICA, for his very informative presentation. As we move forward, we have to announce that the next speaker, Dr. Luchin Razui, the Director of Cultural Affairs of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation was not able to be present to join us this morning because of circumstances, but he has sent us his remarks by recording. And I would like to ask the ministry to put in place the oral presentation of this recording for our benefit. Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, Honorable Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Your Excellency, Honorable Hag Chad, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Your Excellency, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, ERSICA's Special Envoy to the Caribbean, their Ambassador Mahmoud Selich, Director General of ERSICA, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, first of all, to extend my deepest thanks and gratitude on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to the people of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, to His Excellency the President of the Republic, to His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and all the people that have been part of this great initiative for their genuine endeavors to make this excellent academic enterprise happen here in Guyana after months of close coordination with ERSICA, one of the most active subsidiary organs of the OIC that has always made us proud of its creative work and targeted actions. On behalf of His Excellency Hussein Ibrahim Taha, the OIC General Secretary, who could not make the trip to Guyana due to prior commitments, I would like to extend to all of you His Excellency's wishes of success to this truly meaningful event and to commend the initiative of holding this August scholarly gathering for the first time in the Caribbean region, which reflects our common desire to engage member states in constructive initiatives liable to foster the bounds of friendship, increase mutual cooperation, and open perspectives for further joint actions in different fields within the larger OIC family. The organization of this international symposium on the history and legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean here in Georgetown, Guyana, is very symbolic given the successive events related to the rise of Islamophobia and the fomented hate speeches propagated by some radical extremist groups in the West. This symposium is supposed to be the right answer to those campaigns, as it promises through its rich program and in genuine academic spirit to shed light on the universalism of Islam as a religion of peace and tolerance with significant impact on the lives of millions of people coexisting in full respect and harmony with followers of other faiths. It promises also to highlight the rich and genuine Islamic heritage in the Caribbean and the interesting stories of how Islam made its way in this part of the world. The OIC, being the collective voice of the Muslim Ummah, has always been committed to contribute to any initiative whose primary goal is to reach out to our brothers and sisters in Islam wherever they are, to celebrate together our rich Islamic heritage and pave the way for rather constructive intellectual encounters, sober debates, and open dialogue liable to foster our common understanding of the rich history of our religion and culture and to dissipate any sort of misperceptions or misunderstandings about the message of Islam as a religion of peace, tolerance, brotherhood, mutual respect, and justice. When we first were informed by our friends in ERSICA about this project, we did not hesitate a second to be part of this commendable endeavor, as this is the first time, to my knowledge, we hold an academic event in Guyana and OIC member states since 1998. To our sense, this symposium is a very significant moment in Islamic scholarship, as it would give the larger Muslim populations the opportunity to learn about the genuine stories of Muslims in the Caribbean, how they made it there, how they survived the complex and sometimes hostile historical and socio-cultural circumstances throughout different historical phases, and how they look to the future with hope, aspiration, and renewed determination to thrive, prosper, and live in peace with their fellow countrymen, neighbors, and nations of the world. As Dr. Aliya Khan, one of the eminent participants in this symposium, said in an interview on the occasion of the publication of her interesting and worth-reading book, Far from Mecca, Globalizing the Muslim Caribbean, and I quote, "Muslims have been a part of Guyanese and Caribbean history since the earliest colonial era. We cannot define Caribbean Muslim history in US terms using 9/11 and American national discourse as a benchmark." The quote ends here. I truly adhere to her statement and would definitely add that these symposiums offer us a great opportunity to explore in depth the intellectual, cultural, and spiritual exchanges between populations and scholars across the Caribbean region, and to reflect not only on the history of Islam in this part of the world, but also on the status and future perspectives of scholarship around this history, which is somehow understudied and under-theorized, and which would leave a reliable legacy of stories for young Guyanese and the coming generations of Caribbean populations coexisting in peace and living together in harmony in the Caribbean. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with this in mind that the OIC participates in this August academic event to reaffirm, if need be, its firm belief in the power of intellectual learning, academia networking, and cultural diplomacy, and in the perspective of providing such informal spaces of open dialogue and useful exchange of ideas. Our approach is very simple. Let people from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds come.
The library serves
human values that transcend territorial borders and stand as a reminder of our common humanity and our shared ideals, and as a bulwark against divisive agendas and extremist tendencies. Allow me, and at the end, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to reiterate once more our deepest gratitude and sincere thanks to the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana for offering us this opportunity to meet here in the beautiful city of Georgetown to reflect on our shared Islamic heritage and to celebrate our common human values that go beyond any differences related to spiritual, ethnic, or cultural specificities. We wish the best of success to the proceedings of this August International Symposium. May Allah bless all our endeavors and lead us to the right path in the service of humanity at large. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Okay, thank you very much. We have just heard from Dr. Luchin Razul, Director of Cultural Affairs of the OIC. And he was speaking on behalf of the Secretary General of the OIC. So he was delivering the views of the Secretary General of OIC. We heard from Dr. Quick, Special Envoy, and from His Excellency Dr. Kilich, the Director General of IRSICA. And they made several references to the history of Islam and with respect to this particular region. And when I look at the next item that is to come, it triggered my interest because it is a cultural item to be presented by Tayyib Hamza, who is the deputy imam of the Masjid Al-Mundawar. Masjid Al-Mundawar. And it triggered my interest because it is a chant it is an Islamic chant in the Yoruba language. And it brings to mind the fact that Islam came to the Caribbean region through a number of channels, including slavery, including indentureship, and indentureship from West Africa, and as well as slave voyages from West Africa. Now, in the home of the Yoruba language is Nigeria, and Nigeria has three main religions, and the largest of them is Islam. And normally you would expect Islamic presentations in the Hausa language of Nigeria. Here we have it being presented in Yoruba, which is an extremely interesting little detail. But it reminds us of the fact that Islam also came to the Caribbean from West Africa. And it is therefore my pleasure to invite Toyib Hamza, Deputy Imam of the Masjid Al-Mundawar, to give us a presentation, an Islamic chant in the Yoruba language.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من أمازات الشياطين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم يا ربنا الله يا رحمن يا ربنا الله يا رحمن ويا حي ويا قيوم الله يسر أمورنا olùgbóhùn Allah ọba ẹlẹ́dá olùgbóhùn Allah ọba ẹlẹ́dá gbóhùn mi Olúwa kó gbàdúrà mi Allahu lẹ́tífù kó ṣàánú fún mi. Numije ojú mi nù ya ilahi Numije ojú mi nù ya ilahi mo ké p'Ọlọ́hun Allah mo tẹ́wọ́ rawọ́ má jẹ́ kí n káwọ́ mi kò lófìfo rẹ̀ mí lẹ́kún Olúwa tẹ́wọ́ gbọ́rọ̀ mi rẹ̀ mí lẹ́kún Olúwa tẹ́wọ́ gbọ́rọ̀ mi má jẹ́ kí n ṣẹlẹ́yà má jẹ́ kí n ṣẹ̀sín ẹ̀kún mi yìí pọ̀jù dákun ṣàánú mi kò sẹ́ni tó lè rẹ̀ dálẹ́kun láyé kò sẹ́ni tó lè rẹ̀ dálẹ́kun láyé tó dàbí Allahu aláránṣẹ́ gbọ́rọ̀ mi rò Allahu gbàdúrà mi bùkátà mi Olúwa bá mi tètè gbọ́ bùkátà mi Olúwa bá mi tètè gbọ́ lànà kò mí ẹlẹ́dà mi pẹ̀láránṣẹ́ síjú àánú rẹ̀ wò mí Ọbángíjì dùnnú mínú Olúwa kò gbọ́ àdúrà mi dùnnú mínú Olúwa kò gbọ́ àdúrà mi má jẹ́ kọ́tá yọ mí kó bí mi léèrè pálá ọba mi dá tí mo gbẹ́kẹ̀lé kò sẹ́lẹ́dà kankan kò sẹ́ Ọlọ́run kan kò sẹ́lẹ́dà kankan kò sọ Ọlọ́run kan láyé lọ́run tí ń bẹ lẹ́yìn Allah ọba léwí lè ṣe alágbára ọba bí olúwa mi kò mọ̀mọ́ sí ọba bí olúwa mi kò mọ̀mọ́ sí mímọ́ mímọ́ f'Olúwa ọ̀bángíjì tó tó fún olúwa mi kàbíyèsí rẹ̀ ọba tí wọn kì í pa ọba tí kì í kú ọba tí wọn kì í pa ọba kì í kú àpá ní ayé ní àdáyé dọ̀run kò sí irú Allahu níbi gbogbo ṣebí ìwọ lọba tó fún Sárátù lọ́mọ ṣebí ìwọ lọba tó fún Sárátù lọ́mọ ṣebí ìwọ lọba tó fún Hánátù lọ́mọ tètè dá mi lóhùn kó fún mi tèmi ọmọ àtàtà àgbẹ̀yìn tẹ̀yìn ṣe ọmọ àtàtà àgbẹ̀yìn tẹ̀yìn ṣe ọmọ ìdùnnú olóríire ọmọ má fi kan gbà kan lọ́wọ́ mi ya Rabbi bó wọlé Allahu bó wọlé onífà bó wọlé Allahu bó wọlé onífà bó bá bá wọn gbẹbọ kó ṣoògùn ṣáwo ṣègbára àlà níjẹ kọ̀rọ̀ yanjú kalimatullahi hiyal huliya kalimatullahi hiyal huliya fi kulli hini wa kulli makani kalimatullahi hiyal huliya. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Toyib Hamza, for that. As I said, a very interesting presentation of an Islamic chant in Yoruba, in the Yoruba language. Our proceedings now bring us to the culmination and the high point of this morning's opening ceremony of this conference on the history and legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. And I made reference earlier on to how seriously this particular conference was taken by the government of Guyana and working in partnership with the OIC and IRSICA in presenting this conference. And there is further testimony of the level of importance given to these affairs because of the presence and participation of His Excellency, the President of Guyana. The fact that he found it sufficiently important to have it as a part of his very demanding calendar of events this week, to come to this opening ceremony and present the feature address. So it is my privilege, I feel very honored, to invite His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, to present the feature address.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace, blessings, and mercy of God be with all of us. I'm very pleased this morning also to see my very good friend, Al Crichton. And those of you, young people who don't know, this is a very special personality in Guyana, and I want to really acknowledge your presence and thank you for being here this morning. I welcome you to Guyana and wish you a pleasant stay. Les doy le bienvenida a Guyana y les deseo una estancia agradable y exitosa. As you're all aware, I've just also greeted you in Spanish because I too started a journey of ensuring we make Spanish our second language in Guyana. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, professors, doctors, experts, historians, Speaker of the National Assembly, members of cabinet, members of parliament, members of the diplomatic community, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, children, very importantly. I'm delighted to be here today to inaugurate the International Symposium on the history and legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. But before I do so, I want to urge us not to be captured in the context of the forum by the concentration on the subject matter of history and legacy. Because if we capture ourselves in the context of history and legacy, we will believe that we are in a symposium or a forum dealing with the past, documenting the past, and looking at context of the past. That is far from what I believe this forum should be looking at. The forum, of course, is designed to use the history and legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean as a footing and a foundation through which the dialogue of the future, the conversation of the future, and the message of the future will surround. So let us not only contemplate our effort on the history. It's important because the context through which the conversation must develop is important. The context, and that is why the intellectual power is designed behind the forum, because the intellectual power is to bring the history and context, and then to build off that history and context and position us in the present day, and then looking at the challenges of the present day and the future, and then to speak about the strategy forward. There are a number of very important names that would have done some significant research on the subject matter, and a lot of my quotation will be based on a lot of their work also. Ray Chicory and Shabnam Ali are some of the names that did a lot of work also on some of the historical context. Before I go into some aspects of the matter before us, I just want to reference Quranic verse, the meaning of a very important Quranic verse first, because to contextualize the history from the revelation. And it's 49:13. O humankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you people and tribes, that you may know each other. Very important. It's very important, especially as we examine the history, culture, and art. You just saw two different cultures presenting from African subcontinent, from India, the culture that came from India. So this was not by accident. So I want to start this conversation by us understanding that us being different is not by accident. not different in equity. We are equitable. We are one when it comes to that. But different in the way we look, different in the way we were designed, different in the tribe we come from, different tribes we come from, different from the people, the origination of each of us. It is not by accident. The Holy Quran that we're examining today made it clear that we were created, male and female, and made people and tribe that you may know each other. So it did not only say that you're created differently, but for the purpose of coming together and knowing each other. You can't know each other if you don't come together. So I want to start from that premise. And then to go on to say, just for us to understand some of the historical context, the Muslims came first from Africa in this region. Whether it's the Fulanas or the Madikas, those were the first. Before Columbus came here, there were 300 ships that set sail from Mali. And those ships, before Columbus came, were all Muslims. The Garifunas were also Muslims. Then in 1838, 94 Indian Muslims arrived in the British Guyana, then British Guyana, on the ships Hesperus and Whitby. In the first slave revolt in 1763, which was carried out by house slave Kofi. And what does the name Kofi means? Born on the day of Jummah. That was the first slave revolt that was carried out by Kofi. The meaning of his name is born on the day of Jummah. He was from the Akan tribe of Ghana. Importantly, he was literate in Arabic. Akara, who was his chief commander, and Kwabi were also from the Akan tribe. And that was in the 1763 revolt. There is also the story of Kwamina. And one of the African slaves who testified against the ringleaders. And there's documented history that he asked to take his oath in Arabic and using the Quran. So the history is very strongly cemented in this region, whether through slavery and indentureship. Importantly, and this is directly, as I said, from the work of Chikri and Shabnam Ali, out of the total Africans who were enslaved in Berbice, that is 12,867, 1,198 were specified. What that means is that out of the total number of slaves, 12,867, 1,198 specified whether they were from a religious group or a tribe or something. Out of the 1,198 who specified, 235 or 20% were Muslims. That is from those who were enslaved in Berbice. So we have a rich historical context through which this dialogue is taking place here in this region and in Guyana. Now, there is also a rich international context of the contribution of Muslims to science, technology, mathematics, that must form part of this discourse because of the narrative that is sometimes propagated, which you have to deal with. But sometimes the misconceived narrative is driven by persons and leaders even within the realm of Islam that has no basis in Islam itself. What am I speaking about? Let us take, for example, the issue of university. The first university, and this is according to a piece from CNN, the first university was established, that is the first degree granting university, in 859, year 859, in a university in Morocco. But what is interesting is who established this first university. It was a princess, a woman, Fatima al-Firahi. That's in university education. And I'm giving you some of the less known facts. I'm not talking about the invention of zero and all of these things, and the first flying object, and the first discoveries in medicine that is now called modern medicine. I'm not even going to that. Algebra. The word algebra comes from the title of a Persian mathematician, the Book of Reasoning and Balancing. That is where it came from. A Persian mathematician whose title came from him, the Persian mathematician, algebra. But here is the interesting part. The Book of Reasoning and Balancing, that was the book. And guess what was the root? So this is this Persian mathematician that algebra comes from the Book of Reasoning and Balancing. But guess what? Built on the roots of what? Built on the roots of Greek and Hindu systems. This is a multiculturalism we're talking about. This is that span. This is how things were integrated even long before now. Then we have something that maybe all of us want to drink of now, coffee. Coffee was first brewed in the 9th century in Yemen. That was when coffee was first brewed. And I'm speaking about all things that is related to the topic. And then, of course, you have the issue of surgery. In year 1000, Dr. Al-Zahrawi published a 1,500-page of illustrated encyclopedia of surgery, which was used in Europe as the medical reference for the next 500 years. So from 1000 to 1500. The Book of Medicine, the Encyclopedia of Surgery was developed. So these are some examples of some of the things I am alluding to. So this event, therefore, is significant as it provides a unique opportunity to delve into the rich and diverse history of Muslims in our region, and to add to our experience to the ongoing series about Islam in civilization. The Cooperative Republic of Guyana is pleased to be associated with this symposium. This activity is being organized by the Research Center for Islamic History, Art, and Culture of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I welcome to Guyana all the distinguished invitees, including the representatives of the co-hosts and the scholars who will be participating in this important conference. This morning, I aim to highlight the significance of this symposium. I've identified 5 key contributions that this event can make. The first, I believe, is in highlighting the role and place of Islam in the Caribbean's multicultural diversity. And I first want us to recognize that this region is multi-ethnic and multicultural in nature. So our deliberations must take into consideration the makeup of this region. This diversity, as you know, is a legacy of our colonial history. The Spanish, Dutch, English, and French battled for control of the islands and lands of the Caribbean. These colonizing powers have shaped the region's diversity, but none more so than through the introduction of the institution of African enslavement and Indian indentureship. It was under both of these systems that Muslims were introduced to the Caribbean. The Islamic presence in the Caribbean, therefore, is centuries old. Muslims were part of the captive Africans who were enslaved in the New World. It is estimated that more than 10% of those who were part of the transatlantic trade were captive Africans were Muslims. There are accounts of their courage in both openly and privately practicing their religion, despite the environment of the time, which suppressed such expressions. Some scholars like to view the Caribbean as a melting pot of ethnic groups. However, I prefer to view the Caribbean more as a part of a cultural tapestry, with each strand of the fabric signifying the various peoples and cultural groups that constitute the rich multiculturalism of the Caribbean. So we have to design a paper on Islam and multiculturalism in the Caribbean, because there is a mistaken view that somehow Islam and the practice of Islam cannot survive or is different from a multicultural environment. And there is enough examples in the Quran and teachings of the Holy Prophet that Islam actually promotes existence in a multicultural environment. I quoted a verse that said we were created differently. And it also identifies clearly how you must treat each other as humankind in a multicultural environment. So the basis is clearly defined. It is therefore important, I believe, to distinguish the various strands that constitute this tapestry and to ensure that Islam is not relegated to obscurity. I believe this symposium will help bring greater awareness of Islam in our multi-ethnic Caribbean. In so doing, I believe that we can better celebrate and preserve the rich tapestry of cultures that constitute the Caribbean. Very important, because Islam has to survive and stay alive in this multiculturalism that I'm speaking of. The second significance of this conference, I believe, flows from the experience of Muslims in the Caribbean. The experience is different from that of Muslims in, say, for example, the Middle East or the Arab world, and holds vast lessons for Islamic civilization. The Muslims of the Caribbean have been extremely resilient. The practice of Islam was not encouraged during colonialism, but Islam would take root and flourish, particularly after the end of indentureship. So this is a different environment. And I think we have the greatest examples to demonstrate to the rest of the Islamic world the resilience, the strength of character, and the fortitude of the Muslims, who not only survived, but were able to keep Islam alive under very difficult conditions. The history of Muslims in the Caribbean is one of resilience and resistance. Despite facing daunting challenges, Muslims managed to preserve their faith, culture, and traditions, while simultaneously becoming an integral part of the Caribbean societies. Within the historical narrative of Islam's presence in this region, there exist valuable lessons of resilience and resistance that warrant attention. In Guyana, where the symposium is being held, we have the greatest example in the way we live, in the way we collaborate and cooperate, in the way we come together, in the way we respect each other when it comes to religious tolerance and also religious integration. And Guyana can be that case study for the rest of the world, where persons of different faith make up the cabinet, make up the parliament, make up the bureaucracy of government, make up the private sector. And the seamless integration through which each supports the other is one that not only warrants attention, but warrants a case study. And perhaps it is because of the joint challenges that all the groups face, the common challenge of slavery, indentureship. That common challenge is what forged life for that greater good. A defining feature of Islam in Guyana has been this peaceful coexistence with other religious groupings. Islam in the Caribbean has not been characterized by the level of intolerance and violence existing in other parts of the world. While they were isolated, very, very isolated issues in our history, small and isolated, we are that example that can be shown. Islam's ability to foster harmonious relations with other offers in the Caribbean offers valuable insights that can benefit this wider Islamic world. I anticipate that this conference will help pinpoint the factors contributing to this dynamic relationship and interrelationship. Now, I can give you many examples about different philosophy and profiling. I was profiled. I traveled as a minister of government, and I spent hours in secondary at the U.S. immigration, only to be told afterwards that my name is a close match and that it will be corrected on my next visit. And on my next visit, I'll be pulled again and told the same thing. It will be corrected on the next visit. But my reaction is one of, I understand the circumstances. It's not one of anger, because I understand that there is a security element to this. Whilst at the same time I know that they should have the technology to clear it up after 3 times, I did not allow it, and I do not allow it to anger me. Because you have to understand the context of the environment. And that is another part of faith, patience. So I understand. I don't speak from a position of ignorance. I understand sometimes the feeling of hurt. But you have a responsibility to respond and react in a manner and in a way that sets you apart, that signify and dignify what the Islamic principles stand for. The third significance of this symposium on Islam in the Caribbean, I believe, has to do with the religious pluralism in the region. The Caribbean's religious landscape is incredibly diverse, reflecting the historical and cultural complexity of the region. Hinduism, Rastafarianism, traditional African religions, Judaism, Hinduism, indigenous belief, Christianity, and many more, all make up who we are. And as a leader, I can go into any facility and be comfortable. And this is not by accident, because of the way we approach life. If you approach life by understanding that your duty is to teach and to give your best advice, and then it's up to those who listen, then you fulfill your duty. But if you believe that your duty is to take a sledgehammer and sledge it into someone, then you will take a different approach to life. And that is not your duty. Your duty ends at teaching and educating. It does not go beyond that. That is my principle. And if we adopt the principle, we'll have respect for each other. Yes. Whether you're a Christian leader or a Muslim leader, you would like to bring more. You would like to add to the flock. Because that is part of your teaching, to grow the flock. But growing the flock is only through education. That is where it ends. From the time we attempt to take growing the flock beyond education, that is when the challenge happens. That is when it becomes challenging. Because you're assigning yourself additional jurisdiction than what is applicable based on your teaching. That is why the verse says we were created as male and female, created as different people and tribes, but we have responsibilities. So the historical context must also evaluate that responsibility and the execution of that responsibility. So the results of this conference have the important potential to spark a more extensive dialogue on this matter. This conference must be able to produce that academic paper that must spark a new dialogue. Importantly, this conference is also held in the Western Hemisphere. Very important. An academic paper that comes from a multicultural, multi-ethnic community in the Western Hemisphere can become a very important piece of document. Take, for example, the principles that we stand for. See, in every single United Nations speech of Guyana, a paragraph is always set aside to speak about the Palestinian issue and about the Cuban issue. Every single one. Successive governments of Guyana. And this is because we can easily say that's a different region. The region itself does not represent itself. And that's a different region. Let's not get involved. But when it was the liberation of the people of South Africa, Guyana was also actively involved. Because we stand on a set of principles in the country that supports equality and support the advancement of humanity. Notice in the quotation, it did not say you are created from the west, the north, the south, or the east, or you're created from oil rich or not oil rich, or you are created from superior or inferior, or you are created from the Arab world or the Western world, or you're created from the superpower and the G77 and G20. Those were all man inventions over time. But inventions that were critical because of the failure of systems. And that is another subject matter that I wish you all would look at. The failure of systems. And when I say the failure of systems, I'm speaking primarily of the failure of systems in the Islamic realm of things. One may easily argue on what authority are you propagating peace when we cannot build peace even in a completely Islamic setting? It's a very fair question. But there's an answer to that question. Because if you go back to the root, you will say you were created in different sects, different tribes, as it says. Managing 70 different tribes in one land is not an easy task, I can tell you. Cannot be an easy task. But there is a genesis for all of this that we must be willing to explore. We must be willing to explore the history of conflict. Because the first act of terrorism was not 9/11. Because terrorism was part of slavery. If you look at what are the attributes of terrorism and what the slaves were met with, it was the worst form of terrorism. But unless we explore in a disingenuous manner, because you can explore only for a specific outcome. But if we explore in a disingenuous manner, we'll be able to bring the totality of context, reality, and the future on the same table. And that is what these forums must be able to do. I can't remember where I was. I was what? At the third or fourth? The fourth. Thank you. Children, you know, if I forget where I was, I got to start over. And that would be problematic, right? So, this exploration can serve as a model for interfaith dialogue. And I would like to see a firm movement towards an addition to this symposium, especially in a multicultural environment like this, because Islam allows the leverage to reach. And to make use of being in an environment like this, to the extent that we can bring other faiths around the table. And we can have a joint examination of the historical context of this region, with slavery and indentureship. And to review that context. Because there was a time when to get into the education system, you had to be a Christian. To become a teacher or a civil servant, you had to be a Christian. For us to jointly examine this period of the Caribbean history, and I'll Crichton is here, and to come up with, if not joint position, common position on a lot of the very important subject matter. And when you come up with common position, we will be in a better position to influence world change. We'll be in a position to have a broader coalition of forces to influence the dialogue, the literature, and the change that we want to achieve. This is something I want us to examine. In his book, Far from Mecca, Globalizing the Muslim Caribbean, Ali Khan observed that there is no Muslim country in the Caribbean. Yet, he notes, Caribbean Muslims has always had a sense of belonging to the global ummah. Very important. Very, very important. Caribbean Muslims has always positioned themselves as part of the global ummah. Very important point that we must not underestimate. We live in an increasingly interconnected world. Muslims too are connecting with their fellow brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. Islamic countries are establishing relationship with non-Islamic states. The history of Islam in the Caribbean is not isolated. It is part of a larger global narrative. We in the South need to understand our brothers in the North, East, and West, and vice versa. This is why this project aimed at examining Islam in our civilization is so important. It will demonstrate that Muslims are not homogeneous grouping, but show variations across different regions in the world. Variations shaped by historical and other factors. Understanding our respective histories can be a means through which we can also further improve relations between Islamic and non-Islamic countries. In an even more interconnected world, fostering mutual understanding is paramount for enhancing relations. This symposium holds the promise of cultivating more understanding, ultimately forging stronger bonds between the Caribbean and the Muslim world. Finally, I believe that Islamophobia is on the increase. Earlier this year, I observed that Islamophobia is one of the vices of our times. It is a social malaise that fosters hatred, prejudice, bias, and discrimination against persons based on their identification or perceived identification as Muslims. I noted that Islamophobia is historic in origin and can be traced back centuries. Combating it, therefore, requires uprooting its source and recognizing the ill effects. Islamophobia must not be elevated to the West against the East or the North against the South. Let me make that very clear. Because that will be the fundamental mistake. Islamophobia is no country, no system, or no location against the other. There is no war with the West and East. There is no place for extremism in any form, just as there is no place for Islamophobia in any modern, democratic, free society. And we must all have this common understanding. So, we have to be very careful when you examine Islamophobia to not elevate it to a national or global system. The same way, we are asking the rest of the world to not elevate extremism from Islam as a system or a national or global way of presenting Islam. You understand that balance? Because it is easy for someone to say that Muslims are extremists. It's easy for someone to say that Islamophobia is something of the West. That is what sparks conflict. That is not it. There are individuals and groups who may find it selflessly convenient to operate like this. But we have to be careful as to how you elevate it. Education and dialogue are the keys to countering Islamophobia. As such, I remain wedded to the view that studies of the history of Islam can help to identify the root cause of Islamophobia and help to uproot them. This symposium endeavors to shed light on the unique experiences, challenges, and achievements of Caribbean Muslims. It serves as a platform for scholars, researchers, and community members to share their expertise, exchange ideas, and engage in substantive discussions. As we gather here today, it is crucial to acknowledge and celebrate the rich tapestry of Muslims here in the Caribbean. The traditions that distinguishes us in this region. This symposium can lead to an understanding that can strengthen interfaith dialogue, foster greater understanding, and promote harmony among diverse faiths. I'm delighted to witness individuals from various countries, cultures, and areas of expertise coming together for this event. Their presence reflects the global interest in exploring and appreciating the history and legacy of Caribbean Muslims. By collaborating, we can construct bridges of cooperation and establish a platform for meaningful discourse. I am convinced that the discussions and exchanges that unfold during this symposium will significantly enrich our collective knowledge and comprehension of the Muslim Caribbean experience. I honestly hope that the outcome of this event will pave the way for future studies, collaborations, and engagement in the realm of Muslim studies in the Caribbean. I have full confidence that the forthcoming days will be characterized by stimulating and enlightening conversation. I extend my best wishes to all for a successful and meaningful symposium. And I don't mean to be at variance with any scholarly position. And if at any time you felt that way, know that it was my thoughts that I was sharing, so that our view can also be part of the equation. I therefore extend my best wishes to all for a successful and meaningful symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to His Excellency the President for, first of all, having joined us, and then for having presented the first paper in the conference. At this point, there are 3 associations that will make presentations to His Excellency. IRSICA, the Suriname delegation, and the Barbadian delegation. So I therefore call up on His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Kilich, Director General of IRSICA, to make presentation to His Excellency, the President. Okay, then, having the presentation made by the Director General of IRSICA, I therefore call on a representative of the delegation from Suriname to make their presentation. And then a representative of the delegation from Barbados make the presentation. Okay, I think we have had all 3 presentations. Let's see. I just okay, as we come to an end, I just want to make one reference coming out of His Excellency's theme of multiculturalism. I did point out the interesting note of the Islamic chant in the Yoruba language. There's another that comes to mind. The fact that in Guyana, there is a word used to describe Muslims where they call them Fulaman. And the Fulaman is probably a reminder of the fact that some of the Africans who came to Guyana came from the Fulani nation in Nigeria. And that might well be the source of that name. The whole idea of the multiculturalism, we're talking about Islam in the Caribbean via Indian immigration, but also Islam in the Caribbean via African immigration, under indentureship or under slavery. So, an interesting little note on which to end, coming out of what I am calling the first paper in the conference by His Excellency the President. It brings us to the end of the opening ceremony, the opening session of this conference on the history and the heritage and the legacy of Muslims in the Caribbean. And it has been quite a fruitful session. It has been an interesting session. We have seen presentations from various angles, coming from various interests in the subject that is going to be the study of this conference. And we want to thank you all very much for your participation in the events of this conference. And on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I take the privilege of bringing this session to a close. Okay, I'm advised that the Turkish director would like to make a presentation to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we will facilitate that. Okay, then, thank you very much. And I now take the privilege of bringing the opening of this symposium to a close. Oh yes, a group photograph, please. A group photograph. The delegations, of the delegations here.
Thank you, well done. Thank you, well done.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But you are right, his paper was the first paper.
Invited to the plenary sessions after.
What's that? Oh, okay, yes. And I have been asked to invite all of you here to attend the plenary session of the conference after the break. After the break, there will be a plenary session of the conference to which you are all invited. So we have a photo opportunity with all the delegates and the president.